It's been a while since I've shared, so I'm almost rusty. Sometimes I think we lose, I certainly lose track of uh, the whole awakening game, as it were. I like to call it the game. And recently, something dawned on me that was pretty profound, I suppose. And it was a way to look at this and to understand what it is that we're actually doing. Because we can get caught up in shadow work and methods and ways of doing things and the teachings and different concepts. And we can get really bogged down. We can get really enmeshed in this stuff and get caught up in relationships. We can get caught up in work and trying to embody awakening. And something struck me the other day of just wanting this sense of wanting to simplify it. I don't know if this is going to make any sense or not, but I'll say it how it came to me. Reality is what is. There's no arguing with it. There's no, we can interpret it. We can try to spin it. We can fiercely fight against it, modify it to either make it less painful or make it work in our favor. And realistically, that almost never seems to happen. And it occurred to me the other day where we find the two main things that hang us up. And it goes like this: the space in between what we want and what is actually happening, or reality, is where identity is found. I'll say that again. The space in between what we want and what is actually happening is where identity is found. And that can be kind of anything. And they're not necessarily bad, but that's where we look for the identity, because there's a subtle resistance to what's happening sometimes. That can be, these are my goals. These are my dreams. This is the dream person that I want. This is the dream job I want. This is the car that I want. This is the food that I want. And those particular things make up what we consider to be the individual person. The sense of self is stored in there. And they're not necessarily bad until we start grasping at them, until we start going after those in lieu of what is actually happening. So then we take that and we move it to the other side. The space in between what we don't want and reality is where suffering is found. Again, the space in between what we don't want and where suffering is found. Excuse me, I got that wrong. That's why I'm having to say it twice. The space in between what we don't want and reality is where suffering is found. And this is where all the resistance is. This is where we push against an unpleasant sensation. This is where we struggle because we lost that job, because we didn't get the thing that we wanted, because somebody said something unpleasant to us, because we got injured, because of a million different things. And that's where suffering is found. And what we're doing in this whole deal, sometimes slowly and sometimes in very, very quick bursts, close the gap. Just very, very simple. We close the gap. Because in the end, it's really about identity and our resistance to something that doesn't exist, or our desire for something that isn't here yet. And that, for me, when it hit, it was just became such a radical oversimplification. There's another way to say it, and I just used a few extra words. It's desire and aversion, seeking pleasure and avoiding pain. The body is going to naturally do that. And we have a momentum to our lives. So there's no implication that we need to stop navigating this to the best that we can. But when we start to get tied up in it, when it starts to affect really where our attention is and where our sense of identity is coming from, that's where we have suffering. That's where struggle is. And I know I waited for a long time after having had um, cool aha moments and wild openings and really all different kinds of things, sort of events that are happening to me. I waited for a long time for a grand shift, for something that was very deep and profound. And you combine that sort of waiting, which is in the actually in both categories. So this is what I want. I want this big shift. So I'm looking forward in the future for something. When I awaken, I will fill in the blank. Better, taller, smarter, younger, richer, happier, more blissful. I remove myself from what's actually happening. And then there's a subtle resistance, which is on the other side. This is what I don't want. I don't want what is actually happening right now. And to be fair, that is a dramatic oversimplification of it. And it sounds so nice and so fucking easy to sit here when I, at this moment, am in a particularly non-activated state. But it's not always like this. It's not always just feeling kind of cruising along. Everything seems to be okay. Nothing's, really on my radar at the moment. What about the times when we're triggered? What about the times when our trauma comes up? What do we do then? Many times we can't do anything in the moment. We have to look at it in retrospect. What about the times when we've gotten what we really, really, really think we want? And then a few minutes later, or days later, or weeks later, it starts to sour, or it gets stale, or the novelty wears off. Then what? And it's like, where are we found in those moments? We look really, really, really closely. And this has been a fucking challenge for me, working through so much trauma, which is still ongoing. And labeling myself as having either been more awake, less awake. I was deeply unconscious. I was very alert. I was very present. But there was something, if I looked closely, that was here all the time. And that something had nothing to do with Ted. It had nothing to do with how things were going. It had nothing to do with the location I was in, how much rest I had had, what body was shaped like, what the desires were. There was something steady. And I think I got caught up for a long time, subtly and sometimes not so subtly, looking around at whatever was happening and wanting it to just be different, and not noticing that undercurrent, that ever present, indescribable sense of, you could call it here-ness or now-ness or isness, sense of awareness, alertness, consciousness, perception. So many phrases are interchangeable with it. And when I really, really, really began to look after having exhausted the struggle of wanting everything to be better, different, I started to really examine what was here. And then I started looking at what that was made of. What was it that was recognizing this? Was it Ted? Was it filtered through Ted? Ted habits, Ted conditioning, Ted patterns? Sure, kind of. Then it started to split, and it started to not really split, but it started to turn into a paradox. I saw that the mind was filtering and interpreting what was already here, and it was filtering it through a Ted filter. But there was something that was always here, that was always steady, that never, ever, 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 ever flinched, flexed, moved, expanded, contracted, went dark, got super bright. It was just steady, the steady here-ness. Actually, later on, I started to notice that it stayed there when I was in very deep sleep too, which was that's for another video entirely, which is just wild. So what that does, I think, for us is point to that steadiness that's here all the time, that unnameable here-ness, that isness, that I know without the I, the knowing, the familiarity, not with the object, not with even what's recognizing, but the familiarity of recognition itself. That's something that says, yes, how could this be other? How could this be something besides me? How could this be another person or another place or another country or another planet or another whatever? And it's all located right here. And so when we find ourselves, and when I was finding myself, and I didn't even know this at the time, I can say it later and kind of describe it in a very neat, clean package. It wasn't, and sometimes still isn't, that the grosser things, the more exaggerated parts of the TED identity, the traumas, the knee-jerk responses, the losing my temper, the sobbing uncontrollably, the tremendous resistance to something somebody said, to whether or not I got enough sleep, to whether or not I made enough money, to whatever, those become the areas, the ones that just blast over us. Those become the areas where we do the shadow work. The subtler ones will come later, but the big ones that just lock us into identity, usually based on training, based on deep childhood conditioning, based in habits, patterns, traumas, beliefs, fixed belief that say this is the way the world is. Those are the ones that will pull us the most quickly out of what is happening right now. How are things going? What is even here? What is this stuff made of? What am I looking at? And it's a process. It's absolutely a process. The notion that we're going to wake up and it's all going to fall away, and then we're just going to cruise through life. I don't know of anybody that's happened to. Perhaps it has. I haven't never heard of it personally. Never seen it. There was always some level of work. So we do what we can. And we say what I call is the magic spell. It's not really a magic spell, but it comes from here somewhere. Usually when we've had enough, when we've absolutely had enough, when we've been broken in one form or another, where we've been crushed, we say, okay, I just want truth. I want to know what is, and I'm willing to do anything. You only have to say it once and mean it. I know that was true in my case, even though it's been a fucking long, drug out process. You only have to say it once and deeply mean it. I'm willing to be uncomfortable. I'm here to find truth. And something other than us hears that. Something other than the identity and the person hears that, and we'll take that. And you might find that you're beyond the point of no return eventually, because it grabs that. It's grace. This overwhelming, mysterious presence, or God, or the universe, or life, so on and so forth, grabs that and says, okay, you ready? Let's go. So that's what I have for today. I'm considering trying to be more active on this, but life had other plans for me. So um, I will do what I can to continue sharing as often as I can. Guys, be blessed. Thank you.